More infighting in Washington over how to move forward on Iran. It began with former Secretary of State John Kerry, who said during a radio interview that he had met with Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif 3 or 4 times since leaving office, and that their discussions included the nuclear deal, the same deal that Donald Trump has since scrapped.
And the president was quick to respond. In an overnight tweet, Trump called the meetings illegal, saying Kerry's involvement can only serve to undercut our great work to the detriment of the American people. Well, let's go to Washington now and speak with Benham Taleblu, senior Iran analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington. And Benham, before we discuss whether the correctness of former Secretary Kerry's meetings, let's try to put them into perspective. When he meets with someone like Javad Zarif, how do the Iranians themselves see that? I mean, do they listen to him and act on his advice, for example?
Well, great to be back with you. As you know, there is no love lost between the U.S. and Iran. Iranian officials, whether you believe them to be of the moderate persuasion or not, habitually chant death to America. They know that in their heart of hearts, America is the enemy. It's the country that they're fighting against. It's the country Iran is orienting its foreign and security policy against. And if there is any advice, it's insight that could be gleaned from anything from body language to rhetoric to tone to what Secretary Kerry would say about the American domestic and foreign political scene. So I'm sure Zarif, as an astute politician and as an astute diplomat, would listen to what the Secretary would say simply to exploit it to his country's and to his regime's advantage and not necessarily to ours.
Benham, one of the things that Kerry said in his own defense was that former secretaries of state still do this even after they leave office. They go to other countries, meet with foreign leaders, but the president called these meetings illegal. Is there any way in which it is illegal to do what John Kerry has done?
You know, I'm not a legal expert, so I'll leave that up for the legal experts to decide, but I'll say this. It's never particularly wise to meet with the foreign minister of the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism unless you are the one looking to exploit him for your national interest. Now, Secretary Kerry is out of office. He can meet with whomever he wants as a private citizen. But I would simply say this. It behooves any former or current U.S. official or any person looking to serve the U.S. government to support the robust efforts of the State and Treasury Department right now. As you know, State and Treasury officials are traveling the world trying to make sure that the integrity of American sanctions are felt and enforced, and to say anything other than that would be contradicting or undercutting the efficacy of American foreign policy.
Well, does a discussion with John Kerry, in a sense, give the Iranians or reinforce the notions that they can wait out President Trump, that they could deal with these sanctions, and perhaps a message they're also getting, let's be honest, from the Europeans, maybe the Chinese, maybe the Russians, just wait out this round of sanctions and wait to see what develops in the U.S. in 2020?
You know, that's a very astute observation, because the faction that Zarif and Rouhani represents is the faction that has their own domestic political legitimacy most intertwined with the fate of the JCPOA. That's the nuclear deal agreed to in 2015. This faction is looking to basically play the waiting game because they want to actually get the dividends back from the deal, and they also want to divide the West against itself. So any insight that this faction could have gleaned from Secretary Kerry would most certainly feature in domestic political debates in Tehran, most likely behind closed doors. There is a strong faction that wants to play the waiting game because they know that if there is a different administration or a different president or simply a different tone in Washington in 2020, the U.S. would be looking to re-enter the deal as a supplicant. Currently, the U.S. has the bulk of the leverage. If it re-enters the deal as a supplicant, it loses all that leverage.
So, Benham, you're saying that the president is right in a way to be at least in part concerned about what John Kerry may be inadvertently even revealing in those meetings with Iranian officials.
Listen, I'll leave the legal debate for legal scholars. I simply think that if anyone is doing anything abroad with foreign governments or whatnot in track 2s and track 1.5s, it should be to help make the case for the efficacy of American sanctions. And if you are interested in a nuclear deal, another nuclear deal, a better nuclear deal, a longer-lasting nuclear deal, it should be to support the robust efforts of America's State and Treasury Departments today. But I'll leave the legal discussion for legal experts.
And Benham, just you're reading the situation. We are coming to this period, especially November, when these oil sanctions are supposed to kick in. looking at it now, do you think the the agreement is dead, or is there a chance it's going to be at least kept on some kind of life support for the time being?
Well, currently the agreement itself is limping along. The agreement was never designed, whether it was the U.S. or Iran, by the U.S. or Iran, to simply exist without any of its major constituent parties, those who helped agree to it and negotiate it and write it, to live. So in many ways, it is on life support already. We know the Europeans are expressing political support to keep the deal alive, but if you look at their banks and businesses, there is very little that they're able to materially do to continue to satisfy the Iranians. And that's why you've seen this uptick in Iranian rhetoric about what they would like to do with their nuclear program. Statements by Iran's former foreign minister, current atomic energy minister, Salehi, also reflect this vibe. Iran is probably going to do some graduated escalation with its nuclear program, but it likely won't formally cross the boundary until after November 4.
All right, Benham Taleblu joining us in Washington, D.C.